A week ago today, I received a phone call at 9 o'clock at night here in Springfield, and it was from Vice President Biden. I was surprised. I said, Joe, what's going on? And he said, we've captured Osama bin Laden and we killed him. And I said, that's incredible. We've been trying for 10 years. What more can you tell me? He said, the president's going to speak to the nation in just a few minutes, and he's going to spell out what happened. I stayed up, as most Americans did, to listen to this news. And I'm sure I felt like everyone, a sense of relief. After 10 years stalking the most high-profile terrorist on the face of the earth, we finally caught him, and he was gone. But I didn't realize at the time what was involved in the mission till I came back for a classified briefing. Now America knows that the Navy SEALs who were engaged in this were sent on one of the most dangerous possible missions, accepted it, and did it so well that not a single American was injured or killed. In addition to eliminating Osama bin Laden, we also found a treasure trove of information. We have just started plowing through all the data and all of the hard drives and all of the documents to try to determine just what was going on. But what we know is this. This was the situation room for Al-Qaeda. That building in Abbottabad was the ground zero of the Al-Qaeda movement, and that Osama bin Laden was still personally involved in directing that movement over all these years. We know that cutting off the head of the snake is going to at least slow it down. We hope it kills it. But we also are realistic. There are enough free agents out there committed to Al-Qaeda who may be determined to prove their street credibility by coming back and attacking us here at home. So we have a heightened sense of alert. We also hope that at the end of the day, we can parse out the relationship we have with Pakistan. The fact that this man lived for at least 5 or 6 years, a half a mile away from the equivalent of West Point in Pakistan, is in fact a source of many questions by our government to the people of Pakistan. They have cooperated with us in some regards in stopping terrorism. Their country has been a victim of terrorism more than almost any other nation on earth. And yet when it came to looking for the most sought-after terrorist in the world, he was right under their noses, and they didn't know it. And Lord knows how long he would have stayed there if we hadn't discovered him through our own intelligence network. We now have to work and determine what our relationship with Pakistan must be. We need a strong relationship with them. We send upwards of $3 billion a year to Pakistan to try to help this poor nation along and to engage them in a joint effort to deal with terrorism. But at the present moment, we're waiting for them to complete an investigation about what happened. How did Osama bin Laden live for so long in their country, so close to Islamabad, so near to the West Point Military Academy of Pakistan? These are unanswered questions which we have to focus on. It was interesting, the day after we killed Osama bin Laden, the president, Zardari of Pakistan, ended up writing a column in the Washington Post. And in that column, he talked about how he was happy that Osama bin Laden had been killed. He talked about all of the people in Pakistan who lost their lives to al-Qaeda extremism, including his wife, the former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, who was assassinated by them. It was a very strong column. There's one troubling thing. It was never published in Pakistan. It was only published in the United States. We want to work with Pakistan, but they have to deal with us in honest terms. At this point, we are going to move forward. The President has given his thanks and words of gratitude to the men and women in uniform. I want to join him in saying that they accepted one of the most dangerous and difficult missions that we've ever given to anyone serving our country, and did it as we expected, with professionalism, and they did it with courage. The same thing can be said for the men and women in the intelligence community. You'll never see them. We don't talk about them. They don't carry ranks that any of us would recognize, but they risk their lives just as much, if not more, than our men and women in the military. Had they not worked on this with a determination, a dogged determination, for almost a decade, Osama bin Laden would still be on the loose. For the good of the United States, he's gone. And now we will search out others who want to replace him or want to do the same job he did of killing innocent people. The bottom line is this: when you attack the United States of America, we're going to find you, and we're going to hold you accountable for it. Osama bin Laden's followers know that today. Be happy to answer any of your questions.
With regard to Pakistan, Senator, how much of this is, oh gosh, they didn't notice, he was right under their nose, and how much of it is maybe something a little more nefarious? How much of it is they harbored him?
Well, my foreign policy advisor, John Stewart, said it isn't a question of whether he's hiding. It appeared he was chilling in Pakistan, and I hope that was not the case. But on a serious note, the Pakistan ambassador this morning said that they are launching a full-scale investigation to determine whether there was any complicity involved in this, and if there was, that the Pakistanis would be held accountable. We're going to follow that investigation very closely.
What's your own suspicion, though?
Well, I tell you, I'm troubled by it. It strikes me as beyond strange that they could carry on this operation in the heart of Pakistan when they knew how much this terrorist meant to the world and to the United States. At this point, I'll wait for the end of the investigation.
Do you agree with the White House to not release the photos?
I totally agree with the White House decision. I'll tell you why. I think we have ample evidence from videos and from the statement by al-Qaeda that acknowledged that Osama bin Laden was killed to prove that, in fact, he has been killed and is no longer here. Further, I think that releasing those could, in fact, inflame a lot of our opponents and enemies around the world and endanger our troops. I'd never want that to occur. You want to bring a mic up here?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, cool.
You kind of touched a little bit on this earlier, but what kind of steps is the U.S. government taking to make sure there's not a next Osama bin Laden or somebody in the waiting?
Of course, what we try to do is find these organizations early and to determine who's in charge of them and to basically arrest, stop, or eliminate their leadership. Osama bin Laden developed a franchise fighting in Afghanistan with the United States support against the Russians and then becoming a major player. He developed a franchise. It'll be hard for someone to follow in those tracks, but they may try. That's why our intelligence operation is so critically important. They have to watch out for these people. What I found interesting and, in fact, encouraging was after the assassination of Osama bin Laden, I waited to see the reaction in the Muslim world and Arab world. And although there were some who literally stood up and said that they thought the United States was wrong in pursuing, arresting, and killing Osama bin Laden, the overwhelming reaction was positive. And I think it reflects the fact that we may, and I hope I'm right, we may be moving along from that era of extremism and terrorism into a new era as the Arabs start to take control of these countries by the people for the first time. Maybe it's a new generation of leadership, a much more peaceful generation. It won't be easy, but if we're putting an end to terrorism as we knew it on 9/11, it's long overdue.
Can you touch on some of the steps the U.S. is taking to make sure that a retribution attack doesn't happen, that the retribution for Osama bin Laden's death doesn't happen?
Over 10 years, we've developed a pretty good network that tracks a lot of people. We also monitor conversations and exchanges constantly, not almost, constantly, so that we're watching all the time. That's why Osama bin Laden was relegated to the point where he had to use people as couriers, carrying information. He couldn't do it over the internet. He couldn't do it by telephone. We could be right on him in a second, and he knew it. And so they have a very limited communications network, and that's good for us. We're looking for others in other places that have been guilty of the same thing.
With increased predator drone strikes by the president inside Pakistan, is that going to continue as far as foreign policy and questions about whether we're going to war with Pakistan?
Well, I don't see us going to war with Pakistan, but there is a divided opinion in Pakistan about what we're doing. Some of the leaders have said, this is a sovereign nation. You have no business flying over our nation, attacking people within our nation without our permission. And, of course, when we have these regrettable accidents where innocent people are killed, they're angry and should be. Nobody wants to see an innocent person killed. And there are others, though, who have obviously been embarrassed by the fact that Osama bin Laden was there. We need the cooperation of Pakistan. As long as they are a haven for terrorism, it's going to destabilize Afghanistan and endanger not only Pakistan but the United States. So we're trying to work out a relationship with them. It is not easy, but I think we need them on our side, and I hope they will be.
Will the president still visit Islamabad this year?
I don't know if he planned on it. Did he say that?
I think so.
Well, I hope he does. It'll be the most secure visit ever when you consider what he's going into. But we need them as an ally.
We are at war still on three fronts. Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. So on the one hand, that part's not over. We still have Osama, but those other efforts charge on.
Well, Iraq is coming to an end, and the Iraqis will be in charge of their own future. We'll have some presence there, but it won't be in any active combat role. I voted against the invasion of Iraq. I think it was a mistake, and I'm glad to see our troops coming home. In Afghanistan, the president has promised that this year we'll start bringing our troops home, and we should. It's the longest war in our history. It costs us $10 to $12 billion a month, and of course we lose American lives on almost a daily basis. So for that reason, we should be saying to the Afghans, this is your country, this is your future, you need to step in and take responsibility. In Libya, we've had a very limited responsibility and role there. I'm hoping that ends and ends soon, with even our NATO participation reduced and ending.
Mother's Day, any reflections on your own mom or the other women in your life who are moms?
Well, my mom was a huge influence in my life. My father died when I was in high school, and she was responsible for trying to raise this adolescent kid, Durbin. And I think she did a pretty decent job, all things considered. But she was an immigrant to this country with an 8th grade education who achieved a great deal and inspired me and the rest of our family with her life, her realization of the American dream. Her love for me and for my brothers made all the difference in the world. I'm sure everyone can tell that story, and I'm equally proud of my wife and the family that she's had a major role in raising as I've traipsed around the country in my political role.
I don't know if anybody's already asked this, but as far as the tapes that were released, I think yesterday of Osama watching,
Yes.
His own self and whatnot. What should we be taking anything from that, or how is that impacting us over here?
Well, I tell you what, that tape was important because it showed a scared old man hiding, watching himself on television, wrapped in a blanket with a gray beard, which he colored every time he had him take a TV shot, so he looked a lot younger and more powerful. That, I think, will serve to destroy the image of this almighty bin Laden in the eyes of some of those extremists. And I think there'll be more coming. What they found in there, one of our leaders said this morning on television, the intelligence community, was the equivalent of the contents of a small college library. So we are going to be pouring through this, every piece of data, every piece of evidence to find out what we can about this network and to stop them from moving forward.
What do you say to those who doubt that bin Laden was actually assassinated because of the lack of the photo and the changing of the story throughout the official narrative?
Well, I would say that the fact that the al-Qaeda spokespeople came forward and acknowledged it is a pretty good indication. If they would have disputed it and wanted to continue to use his voice or image, they wouldn't have admitted it, but they did. And at this point, I think it's pretty clear. Now, believe me, there will be conspiracy theorists who will never buy it. I've seen every time a major person in public life is killed or assassinated, there are always people who make a fortune, try to make a fortune, doubting the reality. But I think there's ample evidence of it. And as I said earlier, releasing the photographs won't add anything to it. As someone said, well, they could Photoshop the photographs if they wanted to. So I hope we don't do it. I'm glad the president made that decision. Okay?
One more other question on other current events. What do you think about the GOP backing away from reforming Medicare?
Well, it's interesting. They started off and they were going to do something to Social Security, and then they changed their mind. And then they were going to basically end Medicare as we know it, and they came home and listened to some of their voters and changed their mind again. Balancing this budget and reducing spending is a tough assignment. The entitlement programs have to be discussed, but they should be in a bipartisan fashion and in a sensible fashion. So many people, so many elderly people and disabled people rely on Medicare. And if they don't have Medicare, then they understand that their health and their future are at risk. So I think the Republicans made the right decision. I think they were off on the wrong foot there in going after Medicare. That's too important a program.